Next up, a man who embodies the intersection of politics and public policy with, dare I say, an obsession with transportation. He's the former governor of Massachusetts, the 1988 Democratic nominee for president, a distinguished professor of political science at Northeastern and visiting professor of public policy at UCLA, and a WGBH alum. Michael Dukakis joins me now. Good to see you, Governor.
It's good to be here, Jim.
So, rate 18 months of Donald Trump for me.
Very puzzling.
What does that mean?
Not anticipated. You know, when he was elected, people said to me, what do you think? And I said, well, look, he's a New Yorker, so he'll be a social liberal and probably an environmental guy and so on and so forth. And I don't think any of us anticipated.
How bad?
Huh?
How bad has it been?
It's bad.
How lasting?
I mean, this guy, if the Democrats do what they ought to do this fall and win at least one House back, and then we go out and get ourselves a good nominee, and I can't tell you who that would be at this point, and beat him, I think reversing all of this will be relatively easy, because it's been so bizarre in so many ways. But it's not going to be easy. This guy has some way of connecting with at least a substantial number of people in this country who, for some reason, seem to like him, and this is not going to be easy.
You know, one of the things that stunned me, a former constituent of yours from Dorchester, CNN's John King, was on the radio with us yesterday, and he regaled me and Marjorie with an incredible set of statistics, namely that the percentage of independents, Democrats, and Republicans who support Trump today is almost exactly what it was on November, I think, 8th of 2016, meaning nothing moves the needle. Total tribalism, total paralysis. Doesn't that worry you as much as the man at the top?
It does.
How do you fix that?
Well, we'll see. I mean, it's only he's been in office less than 2 years, and things are beginning to happen. I mean, this proposal, I guess it's more than a proposal, that we're going to put $12 billion in agricultural subsidies, which of course we don't have. It's all borrowed money because we don't have it, to repair the damage that's being done by this crazy trade war of his. You'd think that that would begin to have an impact. Will it have an impact over time? Yeah, I think it will, Jim. How much?
Forget real people. How about the Republicans? They're free traders. He's for tariffs. They're against bailouts, and he just did a $12 billion bailout, and they're all silent.
And they're unhappy, or they used to be very unhappy about deficits. And we're currently running a deficit of $1 trillion.
So why the silence? Fear of Trump?
No, I don't know what it is. I can't explain it to you. All I know is that the Democrats had better get out and beat him.
What is the ticket for the Democrats in November? There's been a lot of coverage, as you went all of Ocasio-Cortez after having beaten Crowley in New York City. There's a debate, is democratic socialism the future of the Democratic Party? Nancy Pelosi and others say, no, that's just one district, one race. Who's right?
Well, I think it's a mistake to exaggerate the importance of what happened in the Bronx. I mean, that's not the country. And the notion that somehow you can generalize from her victory, that's got to be the Democratic strategy here, I think is a serious mistake. Connor Lamb,
Southwestern Pennsylvania,
strikes me as being a lot closer to what has to happen in most of the country.
So you're embracing moderate, I mean, sort of a more centrist Democratic Party.
I'm not.
Well, that is Connor Lamb.
Well, that's true, but he's a Democrat. He's not a Republican. He's not as tough on guns as I'd like him to be, but he's a Democrat, and a good one. And it seems to me we ought to make sure we don't get into these ridiculous intramural fights at a time when the goal has to be saving American democracy. I mean, that's what's really going on here.
Speaking of the future, just very quickly to 2020, it's possible that two other Bay Staters may follow in your footsteps, Deval Patrick and Elizabeth Warren. Who's better suited to take on Donald Trump?
I can't begin to tell you, and I'm not being evasive. I mean, look, running for the presidency is the toughest thing you'll ever have to do. Nobody knows that until you do it. And they're both not only good friends, but folks that are excellent public servants. Who could conceivably connect? I can't tell you that.
You know, speaking of the presidency, I'm sure you remember this. Who was on the cover of Time magazine 30 years ago today, July 25th? You know who that might have been?
Who was that?
That might have been you. You and your vice presidential nominee. There it is, to bring back memories.
That was a great Time cover.
It was a great Time cover. Pretty good guys, too. You seem to be as comfortable in your own skin as any politician I've ever met in my life. But do you ever say to yourself how history could have been different? If there was no Bush 1, there probably wouldn't have been a Bush 2 and an Iraq war. Do you deal with that, or is that just in the past?
No, I certainly recognize that, and am not happy about the fact that I didn't make it possible. But you can't dwell on this thing forever, Jim. You know, it was a disappointing loss. I ran a great primary campaign and not a very good final campaign, and you just got to move on. And fortunately, I've had an opportunity now to teach at Northeastern for 28 years. I love teaching. I love working with these young people and encouraging them to do this. And you do move on, but
it's all because of your experience here at GBH. It's my opinion.
Well, maybe.
Speaking of moving on, you're a big transportation guy. You said to John Keller on BZ, Charlie, meaning the governor, is a nice guy, but I don't think he has a sense of urgency I'd like to see in a governor. I assume you're talking about transportation.
Yes.
And he might say to you, you're a nice guy, but you support a north-south rail that his MBDA says is going to cost $12 billion. So doesn't he have a point?
Let me tell you something. That study has to be the craziest piece of work I've ever seen.
The north-south rail thing.
The latest consultant study. We did a project, you'll remember it, called the Red Line Extension from Harvard Square to Alewife. Longer than the north-south rail link, but essentially the same kind of project. In current dollars, $1.7 billion. I mean, this is ridiculous.
So they cooked the numbers to discourage
No, I don't
people
know
from
that they cooked the
supporting this?
numbers. The problem, and we've talked about this before, is that there's no engineering capacity at the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. It's all consultant-driven. That's a formula for disaster. I'm not suggesting that we didn't use consultants when I was governor. We did. But we had a director of planning and construction at the T named Frank Kevel, who was a Boston kid, Northeastern co-op student, co-op at the T, worked at the T. Kevel did $3 billion worth of construction for us, including that Red Line extension, on time, on budget. I mean, these figures are preposterous. That study tells us, if you can believe this, Jim, that the North-South Rail Link,
connecting North and South Station.
That's a mile with
Yeah.
extensions, could be more expensive than the London Crossrail project, which is 20 miles, 13 miles underground.
How much does that cost?
Well, it's going to cost less than $21 billion.
Hey, Governor, in the time we have left, that clearly transportation is a passion. Both you were on the board of Amtrak, you're a high-speed rail guy, so am I. I want to focus on one other deeper passion of yours. Here's a little clip from a recent 60 Minutes.
If somebody hadn't suggested ECT to you, what do you think would have happened
I
to you?
can't imagine. I mean, I think it would have gotten worse and worse and worse.
I don't think Kitty would be here today.
Electroconvulsive therapy, in the old days we used to call it shock treatment,
yep.
was disparaged.
Yep.
What was your reaction to the courage of Kitty Dukakis to go in front of tens of millions of people and talk about the most intimate kinds of things in her life?
Well, she's an extraordinary woman, if I may say so.
You may.
But, you know, Kitty does not consider herself courageous. She went through 17 years of recurring cycles of depression. Nothing seemed to work. Medication didn't work. Therapy didn't work. And finally somebody said, you want to go see Charlie Welch, who was the ECT specialist at the time at the Brigham, at the Mass General, now at McLean, and at least talk to him about electroconvulsive therapy, shock. We did. He's a wonderful guy and a great doctor. And Kitty said, okay, the next time this happens, I'm coming to see you. She did. And the first treatment ended the depression like that. Now, she continued to cycle. She's now on what is called ECT maintenance. She has a treatment on a regular basis. And, you know, she's heading for her 82nd birthday and still the best-looking Medicare recipient in America. And she has now become a leading national spokesman for this. She doesn't think she's courageous. She
What
says,
do you think she is?
well, she's a great woman, and I'm lucky to have been married to her for 55 years. But more than that, she's somebody, Jim, who, and you know her, who, because this had such a dramatic impact on her, she wants people to know about it, because there are thousands of folks out there suffering from depression. You know, it's the second most common depression, second most common illness there is. And she's saving lives every day, and I'm very proud of her.
So are we all. Nice to see you,
Thanks,
Governor
my friend.
Dukakis. Best to Kitty Dukakis.